Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Sona was Issei fiance? Part 4. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Issei had given Sona his queen pea successfully. Happily helping her stand up, he pulled her into a hug feeling content. However, the two of them being left alone was not to be. I know you two are engaged already, but can't you keep your hands off each other for 5 minutes? The one who spoke was Ria's. Teasing her nephew and his fiancé slightly, though her tone conveyed that she wanted to get their attention more than she actually wanted to tease. Catching on to that fact, they followed her back to the student council's office to continue planning how to deal with Kakabiel. Heading back to plotting how to defend ourselves from Kakabiel, we'll need a team maintaining a barrier for sure. But we'll need a combat team for not just Kakabiel, but whoever he brings along. True. But we don't need to bring everyone, after all there's a chance he may leave some people out of the initial attack to go after the barrier team. Issei's right. Kakabiel knows we're going to try to contain the damage. Besides, he may think about trying to overwhelm us by having minions attack in waves. Issei, Sona and Rias took charge of the planning, earning them a pair of smiles from the shadows that no one noticed. Well, it's true that Serafal and Surziches had both gotten a hold of their peerages and told them to keep an eye on the situation and step in when needed. It's not true that everyone from said peerages were ready and waiting. Only Serafal's Knight Pico and Surzich's Bishop McGregor Mathers, who were able to hide in the shadows, were present in Kuo while the teams prepared. I know I shouldn't ask this, but let me join the group inside the barrier. I know that man I attacked. He's the one responsible for my hatred of Excalibur and its fragments. Kiba. Rias, I'm not doing this for my former comrades or for myself. I'm doing it because if that man isn't stopped, it could happen again. I refuse to let someone else go through what I have. If he is your only target, I don't see an issue with it. After all, that was Valper Galilei, also known as the Genocide Bishop, so his words are true. Fine. But considering the stress of the situation, the moment you finish I want you to leave the barrier. The two older devils, while staying hidden, were pleased to see the trio of peerage kings taking the situation seriously yet remaining calm. Pico and McGregor were also impressed with how tactical they were being. Though they had to repress the urge to suddenly jump in and scold them for allowing Kiba to be part of the main attack force when there was a chance of hatred, making him do something stupid. That was the only thing they heard that made them want to chide the group. Eventually it was decided that the barrier team would be Tsubaki, Momo, Ria and Yura. Their protective squad would be Kalwarner, Garen, Shin, Rujal, Tomo, Mitsuda and Motohama, with Arena accompanying them since she didn't have her Excalibur fragment anymore. Aside from Garen, Kalwarner, Rujal and Tsubaki, the devils not going into the barrier to confront Kakabiel were the peerage members that they weren't certain could properly defend themselves from the cadre class Fallen Angel. Confronting Kakabiel himself would be Issei and Bova, with Zophiel acting in support. Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, Kiba, Zenobia and Gasper were to deal with anyone that Kakabiel brought with him before ganging up on Kakabiel. Because of the severity of the situation, Issei had just barely been able to convince Sona to reveal the main reason he gave her a power boost by making her the queen of his peerage. Pico and McGregor, who were watching in secret, were shocked upon hearing the trump card that Sona had hidden until this point. Both quickly revising the thought that Issei was the only true threat to Kakabiel in the group. Though it was a small struggle to not include Gasper as a threat to Kakabiel, since despite his massively improved control over his abilities, he still hadn't been able to increase the amount of time that his ability held effect. 10 minutes would be overkill for a lot, considering the lineup that was chosen to deal with Kakabiel, but he was a cadre class for a reason. Not to mention he was a survivor of the war between the angels, fallen angels, and devils. Even though Gasper was strong enough to be able to temporarily freeze Kakabiel in time, the group would have to seriously injure the fallen. Well, possible, it was doubtful that they'd be able to injure him enough to force Kakabiel to stand down in that time. Unlike with Sona, whose Gorgon Eye ability, which the only escape is if you are overwhelmingly stronger than her. If she could purposefully activate it and affect Kakabiel, it would be all over, since the only escape would be if she willingly left him free. While the two in the shadows revised their opinions on the chances of them having to step in and protect the younger devils, the rest of the group reacted similarly in shock. Except for Issei, since he had already known. Though Mitsuda and Motohama recovered quickly upon recalling when they found out that Sona was a devil, she had mentioned having abilities with her eyes, without actually mentioning what they were. After a while, the group diverted into their teams and set out to be in position by midnight. The two older devils decided to watch the happenings from a distance with their fellow peerage members who were starting to show up. Reminding the group they were only to step in to prevent Kakabiel from killing the younger devils, the two were confident they wouldn't have to step in until Kakabiel had been subdued, though neither Pico or McGregor mentioned their thoughts to the rest. Sona, having a communication circle by her ear, was ready to relay the order to create a barrier to Tsubaki when Kakabiel appeared. Having expected that to happen, he did nothing even as the barrier was fully raised. So the brats think they can handle this, Valper, you know what you're supposed to do. Fried, you'll have to make do with a regular light sword till he's done. You two priests are to defend Valper till he can hand Fried the combined Excalibur fragments. As for you devils, how about I let you play with my new pets? Kakabiel was unsurprised to be confronted immediately when he appeared in the air over the open field that the students at Kuo Academy used for outdoor activities. Since he had given a warning to Issei in an attempt to play fair, he knew they'd be ready and just barked out his orders the second he appeared. As he wrapped up his orders, he used his teleportation ability to bring in a few puppies that were bred from the Greek god Hades' pet Cerberus. While the young three-headed dogs were not as large or as powerful as their parent, they were certainly a dangerous foe to underestimate. Because of that, Issei had Bova step in and help the others deal with them, which was fine, since he had boosted gear active to help make up for the difference in power. Luckily, Kakabiel was showing patience and not doing anything, so Issei just stood at the ready. Zenobia and Kiba were viciously attacking Fried and his fellow strays as they tried to prevent Valper from combining the Excalibur fragments. Though due to not holding back the destructive power of her Excalibur destruction, they were faring much better than the others, having eliminated one of the 3 stray priests protecting Valper. Tell me something, Kakabiel. You want to kill us and spark up another war, right? Then why sit here and do nothing? Other than the fact you're the current Red Dragon Emperor, I have no idea why you think you're as big of a target as the 2 little sisters of the current Satans. However, now I ask you. Why should I do anything now when my minions are clearly slowing your allies down? Why attack now when it'd be easier to wipe you out when you are tired? Fair point, though I wonder just how worn out they actually are. As Issei spoke, Zenobia and Kiba had managed to cut their opponents down to just Fried, though Valper had succeeded in combining the Excalibur fragments and handed the new sword over to Fried. Luckily, the two were skilled enough to keep the battle equal. Sona, Riaz, Akeno, Gaspar, Bova, and Kaneko had cut down the number of Cerberus pups quite handily, currently split up into 3 groups of 2 for the last 3 pups. I see I underestimated their power, but it doesn't matter. Meanwhile, Kiba, Zenobia, Fried, and Valper were treated to a very special sight. Valper, having declared a light-attributed crystal that he used in the process of fusing the Excalibur fragments was worthless, had tossed it away. But having made it using the spirits of those he killed in the Holy Sword project, he was shocked when it reacted with Kiba. A rather powerful glow drew the eyes of everyone within the barrier to the fight between the swordsmen. When it died down, there was a large group of ghostly figures gathering around Kiba. Declaring themselves Kiba's friends and granting him their aid in freeing themselves, the power still contained within the light attribute crystal was merged with Kiba's own. His power, shifting and feeling, jumped up until he suddenly had an epiphany. Pulling some of his power to his hand, Kiba used his sword birth sacred gear to create a special sword. The sword in his hand was both a demonic sword and a holy sword. The 2 energies combined and worked together seamlessly. For everyone but Kakabiel, it was a shock to see, though no one noticed just yet. Fried quickly overcame his shock and attempted to overwhelm Kiba with his fused Excalibur, but not only did Kiba's new sword block the Excalibur fragments, it was sturdy enough that Fried actually recoiled from the blade. Zenobia, I've got this handled. Please go help the others. With newfound confidence and power, Kiba started dueling with Fried once more, the 2 ferociously attacking each other. Despite having 4 fragments of Excalibur fused together, Fried was unable to do little more than attempt to defend himself from Kiba, slowly becoming more and more deranged as he lost ground. Eventually gaining the upper hand, Kiba with his new sword was able to break Fried's before standing in front of him, the tip of his sword at Fried's throat. You can continue howling to the Grim Reaper in hell. But that Fried was defeated, strangely enough at the exact time as the last of the Cerberus pups that Kakabiel had brought for the devils to deal with. However, Kakabiel was indifferent, still thinking he was going to be successful. Valper Galilei, who had watched Kiba with interest after the light attribute crystal reacted, was able to piece together why. His words shocking the young devils to their core. A sword with both demonic and holy power, it should be impossible for that blade to exist, yet there it is. The only possible explanation, yes, that is the only way. Not only must the original Satans have died in the Great War, God must have as well. Sighing, Kakabiel moved behind Valper. Thrusting forward with a spear of light, Kakabiel pierced through Valper Galilei's heart. That is true, God did indeed die in that war for you to deduce that, Valper. You were too smart for your own good. Recovering from his shock, Issei shook his head before rallying the others with his words. I don't know if I trust anything you say, Kakabiel, but even if it is true, we still have to stop you. Drake, we've got work to do. I'm counting on you. Right. Let's go, partner. Issei, having spent the entire time Kakabiel had been present boosting, was lucky. He had roughly 25 minutes worth of boosts already in use, increasing his power and speed to match Kakabiel. That lunge drew everyone out of their stupor as they joined in the assault. Yet Kakabiel weathered their attacks with ease, slowly pushing them back and knocking them down. Laughing maniacally, the fallen angel fought back, easily overpowering the weaker members of the team. Even with that fancy new power, you still don't stack up compared to your friends. Yet together you all still couldn't win. Kakabiel taunted as he threw a small spear of light at Kiba. It pierced his side and was deep enough to keep him from getting back into the fight. Zophiel dropping out as well to heal him. Though the second she fell back, both Kaneko and Akeno were tossed aside as well. That left Issei, Sona, Riaz, Bova, and Gasper still in the fight. Oh come on now, quit hiding your power and use it, damper boy. How do you know? I can feel it. Get serious or die. Flapping his wings, Kakabiel sent a storm of razor-sharp feathers at Gasper, hoping with how timid the boy was he'd use his forbidden Baylor view and accidentally freeze his friends. It would make tormenting the teen so much more fun. But knowing that was his plan, Issei and Bova both burned the feathers to a crisp with the torrential infernos that were their fire-breathing abilities. Sharing a look with Sona and Riaz, Issei had to hide a smirk as things had so far been going according to their plan. While the entire group had been attacking Kakabiel, Issei and Bova had been setting up a trap for the Cadre class fallen angel. Bova had subtly been using his fire manipulation capabilities to create a heated air bubble around Kakabiel, while Issei charged every air particle within said bubble with his demonic energy. Since devil magic is all about imagination and visualizing things, he had to specifically think about what he wanted to do. The reason was if he didn't, his natural ice affinity would take effect and negate Bova's work. Since his look was the signal, Riaz and Sona backed off as Issei and Bova went full throttle. The air around Kakabiel became superheated as Issei activated his demonic energy, creating a spark that ignited the extremely hot air. The following volatile interaction was enough to turn the bubble into a cocoon of plasma. But they knew it wouldn't take Kakabiel out. After a moment they were able to see that Kakabiel had reacted quick enough to shield himself using his wings, which were patchy as the plasma disintegrated the majority of his feathers and melted chunks of the skill underneath. Lighting flapping them to make sure he still could use them and still had feeling in them, he was frozen in time as Gasper glared at him with forbidden Baylor view was active. Now for phase 2. Injure him enough that his magic is diverted to healing him. That way all we have to deal with is his physical capabilities. Ready boys? Nodding at Riaz, Issei and Bova moved away from the fallen angel. Channeling his full might, Bova put his full strength into his hands as he held them together and brought them down in a hammering blow on Kakabiel's back between his wings. The force shotgunned Kakabiel towards the ground. Before he made contact though, Issei used his magic to generate a series of small yet dangerously sharp spears of ice form on the ground just beneath Kakabiel, thus piercing and shredding the fallen angel as he fell onto them. Not letting up on their assault, Sona used her control over water to make a titanic serpent, which impacted Kakabiel and drove him into a deep crater, which rapidly filled up as the torrent of water lost its structure. While all of this was happening, Riaz pulled her power of destruction to her hand, generating a baseball-sized ball of power. Since the group wasn't fully sure this plan was going to work, she chose to conserve some power and didn't bother to compress the orb of power in her hand. Throwing it at Kakabiel, the group watched as her new technique Grenade of Ruin hit the fallen angel in the back before rapidly expanding, though it was only able of growing to match the size of the crater he was in. The attack did unleash a massive shockwave that doubled the size of the crater, before diminishing however. As the teens began to see Kakabiel clearly again, they realized that their 10 minutes were up. The reason they noticed was Kakabiel had started to move his wings again. Despite the damage that had caused, he was able to move fluidly still. Standing up and giving himself a once-over, he noted his wings were full of holes and partially shredded on top of the burns they had previously suffered. His back was stiff, the shock from Bova's attack having numbed the nerves and forced him to stand ramrod straight. Kakabiel also noticed that his chest was extremely sore and starting to bruise, and his skin was peeled in places from Riaz's attack. Turning his attention inward, he noted Sona's water serpent hit with enough force to break a few ribs, with one of broken one slightly poking into his right lung. Concluding to himself that he was pretty banged up, Kakabiel used his power to reinforce his body and start doing a little bit of mending. Deciding to stall until his ribs were fixed, Kakabiel gave a condescending smile towards the teens. Unknown to him, Issei was going to do the same. Not bad at all. If you had done more internal damage you might have actually killed me. Though that was a fairly weak attack, Gremory. You know what happened? Of course I do. Just because I was frozen in time doesn't mean I couldn't see what was happening. Didn't know Gasper's forbidden Baylor view couldn't prevent a person from noticing what happened while they were frozen in time. You're too strong for his sacred gear to work on you, Issei, that's why you didn't know that. Oh ho, you say it has no effect on the Red Dragon Emperor. I take back what I said earlier. You're an even bigger threat than the two heiresses, but it doesn't matter to me. Why don't you and Drake join me? As strong as you are, we could defeat any other faction. You'd have everything you ever wanted, all you have to do is stand down and let me kill those two. Funk off. Like hell I will let you kill my aunt or my fiance. I am with my partner on this one. Threatening another person's lover is not something I can abide by. Aunt? Fiance? Why didn't any of the peons I had watching you report that info to me? Who knows? But let me tell you something, Kakabiel. For threatening to kill my fiance Sona, you've really pissed me off. It's a good thing I haven't stopped boosting yet. Sona, you know what to do. Riaz, you're my support, I'm counting on you. Bova, defend them. Asper, having drained himself to freeze Kakabiel in time as long as he did, just grabbed Kiba and Zenobia before leaving the barrier as Issei finished speaking. Issei charged Kakabiel, who was smiling. He did delay the battle long enough to recover not just his broken ribs and lung, but the majority of the damage on his body. At times like this he couldn't help but be thankful for a few of his innate abilities from before he fell, such as his rapid healing. His smirk was short-lived however when Issei brutally slammed into him. Thanks to the boosts, Issei was now not just equal to Kakabiel, but faster and stronger. While Kakabiel knew he still had a decent chance to win, it was only if he could take the others out. Even though it was extremely painful, he used his wings to blow Issei away, even if it was only long enough to overpower the others. He didn't expect to see Sona's eyes glowing golden as she glared at him. Kakabiel also didn't expect to suddenly feel his senses dull and his movements slow. It was such a shock that he didn't even notice when Bova hit him square in the jaw. Not knowing what caused the change, Kakabiel made a few spears of light and threw them towards the teens, but by that point Issei was back. Seeing the situation on hand, Issei used his gauntlet-covered left hand to smash the light spears. Nodding to Bova, they traded places as Issei unleashed a torrent of fists on the fallen angel. Despite his handicap, the experience he had was enough to keep it from being a one-sided beatdown. But he was starting to fail. His lowered senses and slower speed meant his reflexes were not good enough to keep up. Kakabiel, however, was still extremely dangerous, as he knew he couldn't be careless and unleashed his full power, using his magic to attack Riaz, Sona, and Bova, who while doing fine, were starting to wear down. Catching on to his plan, Issei forced Kakabiel to the ground before disengaging the fight for a moment. You guys aren't going to be able to keep up much longer. Bova, get them out of here. You sure, boss? Yeah. I've still got a few tricks up my sleeve. Not to mention I can sense my rival's host is nearby. If we drag this out just a little more, he may get bored and join in. Right. Riaz, Sona, let's go. No, I'm not leaving him. I love fighting just as much as the next guy, but this isn't a fight for us. We can't keep up anymore and we'll just get in the way. Sona, have some faith in me. Have I let you down yet? But that she conceded and left the barrier with Bova and Riaz. Once they had gone, Issei turned to Kakabiel, who had chosen to recover a bit more while they talked. Knowing that he couldn't do anything to change the situation just yet, the fallen angel had started thinking about how to get away and try again later. He was unable to do so as Issei ferociously and viciously started attacking again. Even with Sona no longer being close, he was still affected by her Gorgon's eye and barely able to hold his own. Noticing that, he frowned, wondering why her ability was still active. He was also curious as to what her ability was, since he had no info on her magic beside the heiress's obvious talent with water. While he was distracted by his thoughts, Issei had enough and was trying to finish it. Building up his draconic energy, Issei pointed the palm of his boosted gear at Kakabiel before unleashing his dragon shot, which was much stronger compared to the last one he had used. Unfortunately, Issei was almost at his limit endurance-wise. Something Kakabiel noticed and tried to capitalize on. Yet before he could even move, a figure in white armor forced him to the ground. You didn't do too bad. Gotta get stronger if you want to fight me evenly though. I was wondering when you'd show up, Volley. As much as I love a fight, I suggest you stop now, Kakabiel. He may be the Red Dragon Emperor, but Azazel wants me to take you back and sadly orders take priority. You want to continue, it'll be against both of us. While Volley spoke, the others, who at this point could tell the fight was over as they couldn't feel the clash anymore, disabled the barrier and came to see what happened. But before anyone could say anything, Serafol and Serziches themselves appeared with Serziches' Bishop McGregor, along with his queen and wife Grafia. Serafol explained that they had sent their peerages in to keep an eye on things and step in when needed, but they never got the chance, and the moment Volley appeared, she and Serziches were called by McGregor, who quickly filled them. Volley for making Kakabiel stand down. Serziches ordered McGregor to seal the fallen angel and make it easier for Volley to take him to Azazel for punishment. The entire time that was going on, Grafia was checking over the teens, especially Issei, and sneaking glares at her husband for keeping her out of the loop. The only reason she was there now is that she was standing behind Serziches when the Satans were called by McGregor and she refused to stay behind. Once everyone had calmed down, Volley left for the Grigori. Serafal and her peerage left to file a report on the situation since she was the one that handled foreign affairs. Serziches gave the teens an order to go home and rest and dragged his wife away from their oldest son upon seeing that he just worn out from the fight. It had been a few days since the ordeal with Kakabiel. A lot of interesting things had happened for our group of young demons. Those that were inside the barrier and that heard Kakabiel say that God was dead had agreed to keep silent about it in front of the one exorcist that wasn't in the thick of it. Irina knew that something had happened though, since Zenobia wasn't as overzealous as normal and seemed to be getting pretty friendly with Riaz and her peerage. Zenobia and Irina had made their report to the church via phone call and had just finished waiting for the day they were scheduled to return to Italy. But only Irina returned, as Zenobia decided she couldn't continue working for the church with the same energy as before. Looking back on her time as an exorcist, she realized that things hadn't felt right. Deciding that if Kakabiel was right that God had perished, Zenobia told her newfound friends that she wouldn't be able to blindly obey the church as she had before, which would have eventually lead to her being excommunicated. Though she secretly feared it would happen anyway if the church found out she heard Kakabiel's words. Since she had nowhere else to go, the devils in Kuo extended an invitation to stay with them. Because she had been opening up to Riaz and Akeno, she stayed with them, eventually convincing Riaz to cave in and reincarnate her as a devil. When all was said and done, she had become Riaz's second knight. Zenobia had no trouble acclimating to being a devil and quickly cemented herself as a melee combatant for the group. Serafal and Serziches had been keeping them informed on the situation with the Grigori, and thus the teens were unsurprised to learn that a meeting had been called between the devils, angels, and fallen angels. Azazel had told Serafal that he called for the meeting to publicly apologize for Kakabiel's actions, as well as to announce what Kakabiel would be punished with. But Sona and Issei suspected Azazel was merely using that as an excuse and that his real goal was to establish a proper peace between the three factions. As the appointed day for the meeting grew closer, the teenage devils were told that only Serafal and Serziches would be present at the meeting, since Ajuka and Falbium were needed to manage the day-to-day aspect of leading the underworld. The two older devils revealed that as what was very nearly ground zero for another war between the factions, Kuo would be where the meeting was held. As such, the older devils declared that the three teenage kings would have their peerages acting as the devils' portion of the security, while the kings themselves gave their account of what happened with Kakabiel. Eventually the day of the meeting came. While the teenage peerage kings weren't sure who was coming from the Angels faction and they didn't know who Azazel's second in command for the meeting was, they did learn who was brought as security. Evan had of course brought Irina, Dulio Gesualdo, the strongest exorcist, and as a pleasant surprise for Issei, the second figure acting as a guard in the room was Griselda Quarta, the woman who taught Issei about the supernatural. As for Azazel and his companion, their protectors were Volley, who Issei recognized, and a man named Tobio Icus. As for the teens, their peerages were asked to guard the room from the outside, though Zenobia was currently with the three kings, as she technically had to give the full report to Heaven on why she left. Once all the guards were in place in the room, the 6 leaders that had been chosen to attend the meeting entered to reveal Michiel and Gabriel representing the angels, Azazel and Barakiel for the fallen angels, and of course Erafal and Serziches for the devils. Once they were seated, Azazel kicked the meeting off by apologizing for Kakabiel's actions, though he sounded very insincere. He did however explain that Kakabiel had been sentenced to be frozen in the Cossidus. Michiel and Gabriel sighed sadly at that, but neither argued it, while Serziches and Serafal smiled, both trying to keep a lid on their overprotective nature. Now then, you all know now about his punishment, and I explained why he went rogue. While I don't have an accurate account for what he had done before targeting the Excalibur fragments, we do have some people who can report exactly what happened afterwards. With Azazel's speech finished, the teens reported what had happened leading up to Valper Galilee's realization, before going silent and allowing Zenobia to speak, since it was her reason for leaving the church. After Kiba achieved his balance breaker, Valper had an epiphany of sorts. He claimed the only way Kiba's balance breaker could be possible was if God had died just as the original Satans had. Once he finished speaking, Kakabiel killed him, stating that is true, God did indeed die in that war. For you to deduce that, Valper. You were too smart for your own good. All of us present were shocked, but Issei shook it off because we had no way of knowing if he was being truthful. Thanks to Issei's words, we all recovered our wits and proxied it to fight. But Kakabiel was both strong enough and skilled enough to fend our group off, slowly whittling our numbers down until it was just Sona, Issei, his Rookbova, my Bishop Gasper, and myself. At that point we tried to use Gasper's sacred gear Forbidden Baylor View to our advantage, but even with its aid we weren't able to finish him off. Once Kakabiel recovered from being frozen in time, it was Issei on offense, Riaz was acting as a support, and Bova defending her, and I tried to use one of my hidden aces. It wasn't able to fully take effect, but it dulled his abilities and reactions enough to allow Issei to fight him one-on-one. At that point Issei was the only one with the energy to keep going, so he had Bova get everyone out of the barrier. Thanks to Sona's trump card, I had a clear advantage over Kakabiel, and I capitalized on it, but even with Drake's help, my stamina wasn't up to the task of finishing him off. Luckily for me, when Kakabiel noticed that I was starting to lose ground, Volley came in. Since he was in perfect condition, and Kakabiel was extremely roughed up at that point, was unable to fend off Volley and was taken back to the Grigori for punishment. As the teens finished their report, the room was silent. Eventually, with a sigh, Michiel started to speak. Sadly, Kakabiel was correct. Father did indeed fall in the war. Because the faith in the church would plummet massively if it were exposed, we decided to keep it a secret. Zenobia, I bear you no ill will, as you have willingly chosen this. Yes. That is correct, Lord Michiel. Then all I have to say is I wish you happiness. But that Zenobia was dismissed to join the others as guards. Issei, Sona and Riaz moved behind Serafel and Surziches, and the meeting continued much how Issei had predicted, with Azazel pushing for a true peace between the three factions. Michiel and Gabriel agreed quite readily, and while Surziches and Serafel didn't have a problem with it, they weren't willing to go along with it until Azazel explained why he was working so hard for peace. I am researching the sacred gears. As a researcher, I have to know how they work, how God made them, how to safely disable or extract them. I have to know everything. But if I were to start gathering sacred gear wielders to study, you would fear that I was gearing up for war, correct? That's why I want this peace. Also, even if you hadn't asked for my reasoning, I would tell you, simply so that I could do my work in peace. I have no problems with that. I mean, you've been very open with your intentions even before this meeting. So here is my suggestion. Because we all need to fill in the other leaders, let's call the meeting over for now and spend a few days drafting a proper peace treaty. You're only suggesting it so that you can stay in town for a few days, since Kuo Academy's Parents' Day is later this week. I can't deny that. We don't have any problems with taking a few days for this. After all, it will take some work to make something that can appease all three factions. But that the meeting dissolved. Issei and Sona were approached by Michiel, who had heard about their engagement and congratulated them, before asking if they would be willingly to meet again, so he could give them a wedding gift. While that was going on, Irina approached Zenobia and greeted her sadly. Since learning the truth of God's death, Irina was more dedicated to the church, and as such she knew unless she was sent to Kuo, she wouldn't see her friend now that Zenobia was a devil. Volley and Tobio quickly followed Azazel out of the room, while Barakiel stayed approaching Riaz slowly. Barakiel thanked the red-headed teen for taking care of his daughter Akeno. He also asked her to talk to Akeno about meeting with him, as he wanted to apologize for not being there when her mother died. Serafel left the room giddily as she mentally prepared to embarrass her little sister during the Parents' Day. Surziches, however, approached Griselda Corta. I feel the need to thank you. If it weren't for you teaching Issei about his powers, he might not have attracted Sona's attention. I'm sorry, but why thank me for that? Because it was thanks to their meeting that my wife and I were able to find our long-lost son. You see, when he was a babe, Issei was kidnapped from his crib. His kidnapper was able to alter Issei's genetics so that we couldn't find him. Wait, you're saying Issei is supposed to be a devil? Yes. We still aren't sure how, but his kidnapper was able to mask or erase Issei's devil blood. I see. Well, I'm glad I could help reunite you. He's a good kid. When I was called to Italy, I was worried about him growing up, but it seems like he's in good hands. Still, I want to thank you. Since everyone will be in town for a few days while we work on the peace treaty, I'd like to invite you to dinner with the family. Are you sure? Of course, you know, when he told us about your teaching him about his power, he called you his aunt. Besides, Iseki and Amiko considered you his aunt as well, and I'm sure they'd love to catch up with you. I'd like to reminisce with them, so I'll accept your offer. Good. You still know the HIATUS address, right? Yes. Well then, how about tomorrow night you come over and join the full dinner? What do you mean full dinner? Well, Issei has taken to the situation better than most would expect. He sees Iseki and I both as his father, just like he does Grafia and Amiko as his mother. Rather than deprive him of that, he spends time with both of us. But one night a week both families get together for dinner. Eventually the talk came to an end, though by that point Issei and Sona had joined in so he could introduce the two. Naturally, he was excited that Griselda had been invited to dinner and couldn't wait to tell his adoptive parents. However, by the time everything was said and done, it was too late, so he went to bed, determined to mention Griselda to his adoptive parents at breakfast in the morning. The next morning, after waking up, Issei sat down for breakfast with his adoptive parents. Sona was originally going to join them, but something came up at school, so she and the rest of the student council had to be there earlier than normal. Before I forget. On our way home from meeting some of Papa's colleagues we ran into a family friend. Really? Who was it, Issei? It was Aunt Griselda. She is back in town for a bit. Because I told Papa about her, he invited her to the full family dinner tonight. Oh, that's wonderful news, isn't it, Issei? Yeah. It's been a while since we've seen her. I wonder why the church sent her back here for. Maybe we'll ask her at dinner, dear. Now hurry up, Issei, it's almost time for you to get going. A short while later Issei was walking into his classroom, only to be surprised that Momo and Ria weren't there yet. Luckily his two friends from the kendo club were in class already. Oh, there you are, Issei. It's been a while since you've been free to actually talk. Yeah, sorry about that, Katas, Murayama, but I wouldn't change anything that's happened. I know you wouldn't change things with Sona, but why not change anything else? Oh, that's right, you guys haven't heard yet. Sona's older sister is a good friend and co-worker with my birth parents. They had business here in Kuo a while back and decided to visit with Sona during lunch. My birth parents saw me and instantly recognized me as their long-lost child. Would it take them this long to find you? Apparently I was only a few months old when someone who didn't like my papa decided to piss him off by kidnapping me straight out of my cradle. After getting as far away from papa and mama as they could, the person just left me in a cardboard box in a back alley. Mom and dad found me as they were walking home from the movies that night, and you guys know the rest. So you've been so busy trying to connect with your biological parents. Yeah, well, not just them but my entire family and all of Papa's colleagues. Papa? Well, I still call my adoptive parents mom and dad since I don't want to forget them or leave them out. So I call my birth parents mama and papa. I guess that makes sense. By this time the rest of the class filtered into the room as well as the teacher. But there was still time before class actually started, so everyone just listened to the story. Especially the teacher, who was now curious as to if both sets of parents would come to parent observation day, which just so happens to be tomorrow. While the teacher was lost in her thoughts, Issei pulled his two friends from the kendo club to the side. I'm going to tell you guys something and trust that you won't do anything about it. Okay? We all know Riaz was the one that started the rumors about me and whatnot, right? Yeah. She's a bitch. Everyone in her club is a bitch for going along with her. Kaneko didn't go along with Riaz. But that's besides the point. She has apologized to me and been punished severely for it. I get how you'd know she apologized, but how would you know about her being punished, Ice? My birth father is actually Ria's older brother. That means. Yes, she is my aunt. That's how I know she's been punished. I'll trust you on this, but if she does anything else I won't hold back. She's worked hard to earn my forgiveness and I've given it. Even if you two can't forgive, can you at least forget what she's done? I suppose. If you say so. But that the trio of teens returned to their normal seats and started preparing for class. But there was another surprise for the class that were about to be revealed. Issei and Sona had convinced Garen to attend school with the rest of them. Rujal was also convinced. When they went to talk to him about it, he mentioned that he was enrolling in the local college since he, like Sona's other pawn Shin, had already graduated from high school. Alright class, it's time to get started. The first thing we are doing today, however, is welcoming a new student. Please come in. As the teacher spoke, the classroom door opened to reveal a boy, much to the happiness of the females in the class. Issei's friend and Bishop Garen was revealed to the class. Garen's shaggy unkempt-looking black hair framed his face. Sharp grayish blue eyes made everyone feel like his stare was that of a wolf's. A very short goatee on his chin finished off the look, which told the class he wasn't from Japan, or at the very least wasn't a full-blooded Japanese person. He wore the school uniform just like Issei did, with the jacket open and the white button-up shirt undone with a solid color shirt underneath. Except Issei's shirt was red for reasons unknown to those that didn't know of the supernatural, or at least those that didn't know that he was the host of Drag the Red Dragon, thus making Issei the Red Dragon Emperor. Garen's shirt was a sky blue, mostly because it was his favorite color, but also because he wanted to represent his affinity with ice in some way. Would you please introduce yourself? Hi. I'm Garen Flammel. I just moved here recently. I don't intend to hang out with anyone that I haven't already met while I familiarized myself with the town. You already know some of the people here at Kuo. I know the student council members, the occult club members, and Issei there. As he spoke, Garen pointed to Issei. The two shared a look at that, Issei silently telling him that was all the class had to know. Because of his perceived arrogance by the boys of the class when he said he didn't intend to get to know anyone he was immediately disliked by them, thus making the girls of the class see him as another prince of Kuo Academy. The current princes of the school being Kiba for his gentlemanly attitude and non-perverted personality, and more recently Issei. After the kendo club started combating the rumors that had been going around school, his reputation skyrocketed amongst the girls. It only increased further when they learned that not only were Issei and the student council president Sona and Item the two were engaged, thus meaning he only had eyes for her. His fellow males in the school still didn't believe it, but they didn't fight him over it, since he had become friends with not just the perverted duo from before, but Kiba and now Garen. But since they didn't know much about Garen other than his name, his title as prince was the mysterious prince to go along with Kiba's white prince and Issei's ice rose prince. By the end of the school day, the trio of boys had heard all the gossip and news they could handle and were groaning as they gathered with the rest of the devils of Kuo. What the hell is wrong with people? A lot of stuff if they could come up with that crap. I mean seriously, they all know the truth but are willingly ignoring it. That's why it wasn't worse. Issei be glad it wasn't worse, or the other boys in the school might have tried something stupid. Really, you two? Letting fangirls and their fantasies bother you? Ignore it just like you do the hatred of the other guys in the school. Shut up, Kiba. I never had to deal with this crap when I was part of Grasshopper. At this point Rujal, Shin, and Zophiel, who were all enrolled in the local college, entered the room with confused looks. Behind them was Bova, who had to use an illusion spell to hide the fact he's a dragon. Kalwerner was the only devil missing from the group, but that was normal. She and Bova were the only two in the entirety of the three peerages to not attend school. Bova because his personality made it tough to fit in, and he didn't much like the idea of holding back, so they let him get away with just using illusions to fit in with the group in non-supernatural situations. Kalwerner on the other hand, even when using illusions to change her appearance, was too old. Which she was fine with. After all, while she might not have been on the same level as Azazel or Baraquiel, she was at least just as old as the two, having been an angel alongside them. So she normally spent most of the day working on contracts with Issei's familiars Tawny and Tiamat. Because of that trio, Issei normally just sat around with Sona helping her finish paperwork while she assigned her peerage to their contracts. Boss, what the hell are you talking about? But Bova was ignored as Issei and Garen continued to shudder at the attention they had from the female student body. It wasn't until Riaz was able to stop chuckling at them that the non-academy students got an answer. Zophiel had to laugh at them, though she did gain a slight blush from the thoughts that she now had running in her head with a perverted grin. But that should have been expected since she, like most fallen angels, was extremely lustful. Rujal just shook his head at the younger boys, while Shin had a sympathetic look on his face, having had a similar title when he was in high school, due to how hardworking he'd been for the sake of his younger siblings. Eventually the group set about their normal actions of completing contracts while it was still light out. Since they had to act as guards for the devils during the faction meeting, they couldn't meet up at night to train like they had been before the incident with Kakabiel. Later on in the day, Issei, Kaneko, and Sona had left a little earlier than normal, since it was the full family dinner night at the HIATUS household. Since they were going to have a guest as well, Kaneko and Sona were helping Issei's adoptive mother Emiko in the kitchen when his actual parents and little brother Milikas arrived. Issei. Kaneko. Milikas called as he looked for his older siblings, wanting to give them a hug. The two made their way to his side and complied, hugging him in return. All the adults present smiled at the sight, proud of how well the three got along. Grafia gave Issei and Kaneko a quick hug as well before following the small white-haired girl into the kitchen so the girls could talk while cooking. Issei and Surziches shared a smile as they sat down in the living room with his adoptive father Iseki, while Milikas happily talked with Issei about what he'd learned earlier in the day. It wasn't long till there was a knock at the door. Issei moved to answer it, with Surziches following as there was a question he wanted to ask the person they were expecting. The two stepped out after seeing that it was their expected guest Griselda that had knocked. "Hi, Aunt Griselda." "Hi there, Issei." "Hello, Lord Lucifer." "Please call me Surziches." "Alright. I have something I want to ask." "Ask away, Surziches." Iseki and Emiko aren't clueless about the supernatural world, are they? "Appa, what are you talking about?" "No, Issei, he's right. It's been decades now, but Emiko's family used to attend the church I was working out of when she was still in school. I had to rescue them from a stray devil one night and she saw. Because I was working on my own and it wasn't a specialty of mine, I couldn't erase her memory of that night. Iseki, I'm not sure of, but he knew about the supernatural when I first met him, which was back when you were small enough to be cradled in our arms." "You mean? They knew something was off about whoever it was that had left you in that alleyway, so they came to me with you. Because they wanted to raise you, they asked for my help in keeping you safe. They also asked that I would teach you about any possible powers you may have, that way you would be able to protect yourself if the need ever arose." "Do you have an idea of how much they know?" "Well, they know how to use their senses to feel aura, but that's it. So they know we aren't human, but they don't know that we're devils. Unless you've told them the truth, then no, they don't know. But they have good heads on their shoulders, so they won't freak out or change their opinions of you if you do tell them. Since they know about your ties to the supernatural, would you help us explain, Griselda? It'll make it easier to bring the topic up." "Of course. Now then I can see Emiko peeking through the window at us, so I think we shouldn't keep everyone waiting. Issei and the two adults entered the house, with everyone greeting their guest Griselda. It turns out that the women had just finished setting the table when Issei and Surziches stepped out to welcome her, so everyone moved quickly to the table. It was a very good time for everyone since they got to relax. By the time everyone had finished eating, Surziches was ready to talk to Issei and Emiko about them being supernatural beings. Surziches had a hold of his wife Graphia's hand, squeezing it to let her know to follow his lead. Issei did something similar with his fiancée Sona. "So Griselda, I'm told you work for the church." "Yes. It might not be very glamorous, but it is very rewarding." "Speaking of the church, what are you doing back in Kuo?" "I thought they decided to pull their efforts back in Italy instead of struggle here in Japan." "As you know, I've been working as an exorcist. I'm one of the top 5 best exorcists in the church right now, and the leaders needed an escort to a faction meeting here in town. Since I was stationed here in the past, I was a natural candidate for the job." Graphia and Sona both had their eyes open in shock, but because Issei and Surziches squeezed their hands again, only tighter this time, they didn't say anything. "Really now? It must be a very important meeting. I was wondering why I felt far more supernatural presences in town lately. It's a very important meeting. The angels, fallen angels, and devils have decided to change the ceasefire into a proper peace treaty. I wonder. Do you have any part in that meeting, Surziches?" "I'm one of the faction leaders." "Surziches?" Graphia couldn't keep silent at that, wondering what he was thinking. At that point, Griselda revealed to how she first met Issei to the two unknowing devils. Both were quiet as they listened, though they were relieved when Emiko and Issei said that knowing about them being inhuman didn't change the fact they were family. "I'll admit I'm curious now. Which faction are you?" "Griselda is showing you respect certainly, but not enough to make me believe you're one of the seraphs. Plus I don't remember hearing about a red-haired angel. You two know how the Great War ended with the deaths of God and the original 4 Satans, right?" "I remember Griselda telling me something like that. I've heard it before. I'm one of the 4 that has been chosen to lead the devils as a Satan. The original Satan's names are being used as titles now. I hold the title of Lucifer." "So you're the one my father called that walking mass of destruction in devil form." "Your father? I guess I let the cat out of the bag. I've known about the supernatural since I was young because I'm a Shinto demigod. My father is Susanoo." "Is that how the gods of the other factions see me?" "Well, I suppose that's fairly accurate considering I rank in the top 10 strongest beings in the world when I unleash my full power." "Yes, you are exceptionally powerful for someone that isn't a god or ancient dragon. By ancient dragon I mean one of the dragons older than even the original leader of the Egyptian faction Atem. Izanagi too for that matter." Issei, did your arm just talk?" "Yeah, I have one of the sacred gears." "Considering it talks, I assume it's a powerful one, right?" "Yup, that's right, Dad. I've got the sacred gear boosted gear. Which means I'm the current Red Dragon Emperor." That voice was Drake. "Huh? Sorry, honey. I forgot that you only know the basics of the supernatural world. Griselda told you about the Great War between the angels, fallen angels, and devils, correct?" "Yes." "Well, at the same time as that war there was a massive fight between 2 powerful dragons. Drake and his rival Albion. These 2 dragons on their own were stronger than most gods. Anyway, their fight ended up causing a disturbance to all sides during that great war. Thanks to that, they temporarily teamed up to defeat the 2 dragons, and God sealed their souls inside 2 of his sacred gears. Sacred gears are devices he made for humans to be able to defend themselves from the supernatural world. But if Issei is Surziches and Graphia's son, how does he have a sacred gear? Since God passed away at the end of the war, his son and chosen successor Michiel has taken over the system that controls and distributes the sacred gears. However, he doesn't have complete control over the system, so there are errors at times. It could be for that reason. In our case, that isn't quite right. I've finally managed to figure out why I have such a strong connection to Issei. Surziches, you have so much power that despite genetically being a devil, you could be considered a humanoid dragon. Issei inherited that same power, and it drew my soul to him. You see, all sacred gears that have a soul sealed inside them are unique. Most sacred gears have to be unlocked, but those with a soul have more to it than that. Even if you can unlock these sacred gears, they aren't quite as strong as they should be. For example, the boosted gear doubles Issei's power every 10 seconds. If his power is 100, that means after 1 boost it becomes 200. If I wasn't awake and able to speak with him, it would be 150 after the first boost, and the boosts would be much slower, being once every 30 seconds instead. It's only when you have the soul inside awake and working with you to learn about its power that you can access its full capabilities. When there are similarities between the host and the soul inside the sacred gear, it is much easier to awake the soul. But the boosted gear is one of 2 extremely special gears even in that aspect. Greg, what are you talking about? The other sacred gears with a soul inside have access to every ability that soul had before being sealed. Albion and I on the other hand do not. In other words, your boosted gear and the divine dividing that holds Albion are weird. Even among other sacred gears so far, the only abilities of mine from before being sealed that can be used by my hosts are boost, transfer, penetrate, and outrage. But by being my host you also become part dragon, thus granting you the standard dragon ability to breathe fire. I wonder why you only have a few of your skills. Even I do not know for sure. But I have noticed that every time one of my older powers is unlocked, it's because the one that first used it managed to overcome the insanity caused by using Juggernaut Drive, the strongest power available to a sacred gear. In other words, my powers are unlocked the same way I earned them, pushing myself to the limit in order to gain the upper hand in my battle with Albion. But enough about me in the past. You all gathered to have a good time and relax after all. With Drake's order, everyone went silent for a moment as they gathered their thoughts. It didn't take long for things to go back to normal, as Issei's adoptive parents wouldn't change their opinions on any of them, even after learning the truth about them. There was a nice hug between Issei and the two before he made it a group hug. After that, everyone just started sharing stories about Issei as a way to bond. Issei enjoyed the rest of the night with his family after learning that his adoptive parents knew about the supernatural. Because he didn't want to hide anything from the two, he and Sona shared a few stories about things they'd accomplished. The adults minus Issei's adoptive mother all shared a story or two about their experiences as well. Eventually it was time for everyone to go, Surziches being the last one out as he told Issei there was a surprise for during the parents' day. The red-haired devil didn't tell his son anything else about it, so Issei was on edge when he got to class. Eventually he noticed a few extra faces in the crowd of parents. Aside from both sets of his parents, he saw Garen's grandfather and Seraphol's Bishop Ibuki. Griselda was there as well, and most surprisingly was Azazel. After thinking about it for a moment, Issei realized Ibuki was present to check in on Momo and Rya, who were also in his class, probably in an attempt to make it so none of Sona's peerage were left out. Which made sense to him since Sona and Tsubaki had Seraphol, and the other two high school students in her peerage still had their own families looking out for them. On the other hand, Griselda was just lost and looking in to ask where to find the third-year classes, since she had come for Parents' Day to check in on Zenobia, who Riaz had enrolled as a third year. But he had no clue why Azazel was there. As he began to question it, the teacher noticed the man standing with the parents. "Ah, Mr. Azazel, you aren't due to actually start working as a teacher here for another few days. Why are you standing in with the parents?" "I've got two reasons. The first is so I can try and familiarize myself with the students, and the second is because my nephew is staying with me, so I decided to enroll him here. He'd be standing here with me while we wait for the paperwork to go through, but he wasn't feeling well today." "I see. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to introduce you to the students. Class, this is Mr. Azazel. He's being brought on as a teacher and advisor for the Occult Research Club. He'll be starting Monday, but since he's here, why don't we welcome him?" The students did exactly that before the teacher decided to move on from their current subject, which was math. She brought out molding clay and a few water-based paints and a giant stack of construction paper. "Everyone take a sheet of paper to work on, that way your desk stays clean. You can make whatever you want with the clay, or you can paint." Most of the parents got vocal over their children at that point, saying that their kid would do this or that. A few just cheered them on by saying show me what you can do, but Issei's parents all watched him with silent smiles. Because he spent a lot of time creating different kinds of art, they had no idea what he would make with the clay he grabbed. Issei though, knew exactly what he was going to do and grabbed a larger portion of clay than normal. After sitting back down, his hands went straight to work shaping the clay. Within minutes he had formed the basic shape of legs and a body. Some of the other onlooking parents were surprised at how fast he was creating his sculpture. It was like watching a video in fast forward. 10 minutes into shaping the clay, he had a quadrupedal body, 4 thick and strong legs, a long serpentine tail with a spear-shaped tip, and a neck. He was currently just shaping the head, intending to get the shape set before moving on to the wings and then working on the details. While Issei was busy sculpting, Garen had decided to paint. The hand holding the brush started hovering just below the middle of the paper, but off to the side so that he wasn't near the center. Quick yet smooth brush strokes brought the basic shape of a hut. The details of said hut became more and more apparent as the boy worked, the colors chosen and the shading done, bringing the old stone hut to life. Moving over to a sink, Garen rinsed his brush off before coming back to his seat and getting back to work. With a light green, he began working on a circular area that housed the hut. At this point his grandfather, who was watching intently, knew exactly what the boy was painting. While the man was old, he was far older than his fellow humans due to magic. Because of that, he recognized his childhood home being painted by his grandson. Around the time Garen started to work on the trees at the edge of the clearing in his painting, Issei had just finished shaping the wings on his sculpture, which the adults that knew about the supernatural recognized as drag. Though only Azazel was able to truly recognize it, the others only guessing that the dragon Issei was working was drag. Meanwhile in the third-year classes, Griselda had finally found Zenovia's class and was watching over her, Ria's, Akeno, and Sona alongside Serafal, and Ria's father Zeoticus. Zeoticus and Griselda chatted amiably while trying to restrain Serafal, who at that point was gushing over her little sister. The third years had also been given art supplies to work with. Zenovia had grabbed the clay and was making a model of a holy sword, one that she hadn't even told her devil master Riaz that she could use. Riaz had no idea what to make and was just staring at the clay she had on her desk. Akeno was painting her late mother, but nobody knew that besides her. Sona on the other hand was painting with a blush on her face. So far she had one side of the paper as her in a white wedding dress and the shape of a body on the other side. For those in the know about her and Issei being together, which was everyone but the parents and teacher in the room, it was really cute and slightly funny. The funny aspect of it being the fact that their stoic student council president was embarrassed. Eventually lunchtime came and the teens gathered on the roof to enjoy the nice day. The adults all joined, causing a few scattered groups of chatter. Serziches and Azazel approached Issei, leading him to recall his father's statement from the previous night. "So what's the surprise you mentioned last night, Papa?" "Well, Azazel is technically Vali's guardian, so he and I have been talking about the two of you since, as the Red and White Dragon Emperors, you are supposed to be rivals." "That's right. Anyway, Vali likes a good fight, but he knows and understands that not everyone is like that. We're hoping that you could talk to him and shift the focus of your rivalry towards something less lethal than fighting. If it were possible I'd ask you to try and end the rivalry, but Vali is competitive, so I doubt you would be able to do that. Considering I don't particularly enjoy fighting, I'd be perfectly fine with that. But I don't think it's me you're trying to convince. You want Albion and I to be civil towards each other. I can't truly say I'm against the thought since it's been so long I've forgotten why we were fighting in the first place. The problem is with our pride, neither of us will acknowledge the other unless our hosts are clashing in some way. It's why our hosts normally have a very intense rivalry. Would competitive gaming or sports work as clashing? It's a safer form of competition, but you can still trash talk each other. Before Drake could give his opinion on the question asked by Serziches, Azazel had a communication circle appear next to his ear. As it faded, Azazel just gave Issei and Serziches a location and said to meet them later, as he was just reminded of something else he needed to do. Walking towards Ria's queen Akeno, Azazel pulled her away from the large group for a moment. "I don't know or really care if you trust me right now, but I'm going to speak and I both need and want you to listen very carefully." Not sure how to take it and knowing that Azazel could easily prevent her from getting away, she chose to sit and listen to the man. "I know you are the daughter of my dear friend and comrade Baraquiel. I also know that he asked Riaz to talk to you about letting him apologize to you for not being there, please don't blow him off. I understand you don't want to see him, but it's my fault that it happened. He didn't leave because he wanted to, he left because I had a job for him. If you're going to be angry about it, direct that anger towards me and let your father try and make up for it." "Why? Why now after all this time?" "That is a question for him to answer. Bring him here. I want to know. I have to know." Using his communication circle, Azazel told his friend about the conversation he just had and asked the man to come and step in. Well, more like ordered, since he said, "Baraquiel, get your ass over here and talk with your daughter already." Within moments they group of two became a group of three. "Akeno, I'm so sorry I wasn't there when I needed to be. I can understand that. Azazel told me why you left and I'm not mad about that. I'm mad about the fact you didn't try and find me. You didn't come back. When I found out what happened I was devastated. I didn't feel like I had the right to be near you, let alone be a father to you, since I wasn't there when you needed me the most. I've checked in on you occasionally, but every time I even thought about approaching you I froze. I felt like I didn't deserve to be your father anymore. Hell, if Azazel hadn't pushed me to try and talk to you when the idea of the faction meeting came up, I probably wouldn't have pulled myself together enough to try. Well, my old friend, I couldn't just stand by and watch you mope anymore. Besides, with a faction meeting to bring peace, I figured this would be the best chance you got to speak to her. I am still mad at you. But I'll give you a chance." Azazel smiled as he left the two to talk things out. Eventually lunch ended and everyone went back to what they were doing before, the teens all groaning as the school day dragged on. However, because Kaneko was unofficially adopted to be Issei's younger sister, for the afternoon both sets of parents left the second-year classroom to check in on her in the first-year classroom. Once the school day ended, everyone went about business as usual, except for Issei and Serziches, who decided to check out the place Azazel had mentioned to them earlier. As it turns out, the place was Azazel's. Since the fallen angel had decided to stay in Kuo once the peace treaty was formalized, he bought the place for him and Vali to live in. Mostly because he still needed to keep an eye on Vali, who decided that he wanted to stay in Kuo. "Oh hey there Surziches, Issei. Welcome to my new home. It's a nice place." "Yeah. Besides I think you like it here in Kuo." But the greetings out of the way, Azazel lead them to the living room where Vali was currently waiting. Issei walked right on in and sat down beside the silver-haired boy while the two adults watched from a distance. They knew that it would be up to the boys to get the two heavenly dragons to be civil and stop fighting while their current hosts were alive. Vali was sitting on the couch, his right arm resting on the side and his left leg crossed over his right. He turned his head towards Issei when the brown-haired boy sat down. "What's up, Red? Please don't call me that. Especially since I'd rather not have anything to do with Dragon Albion's fight." "I know. I've heard a lot about how different you are compared to his past hosts. I'd like to say I'm different from Albion's previous hosts, but I do like to fight." "I don't. That's not to say I won't fight to protect others and maintain peace. I just don't think fighting should be for fun." "There's nothing wrong with that. Hell, it's probably a good thing you feel that way. We'd probably already be fighting if that weren't the case." "True. Honestly though, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a rival. Just not one that I'm supposed to actually fight with. I'd rather compete with you. Competition brings out improvement in most cases. Rivals are fueled by the desire to be better than each other and constantly improve and grow more capable. It's not a bad idea. But what would we compete in?" "Well, I'm not much of a sports person, so that's off the table. Art isn't really something you could compete in either. There are competitions in music, but I'm not much of a musician. All that really leaves us would be games." "Games would be a god choice. After all, if we were to pick a fighting game like, say, Super Smash Bros., we could still trash talk each other." "Works for me. But why stop there? Why not have multiple games that we are rivals in?" "Sure." After a moment they stood up and Vali led Issei to the game room that Azazel had set up. Even though they agreed to play multiple games, the two started with Super Smash Bros. Since it was the only game to be mentioned by name. Meanwhile Surziches and Azazel both breathed a sigh of relief, happy that they wouldn't have to hold the two down and prevent them from fighting. "I've got to hand it to them, those two have good heads on their shoulders." "You've got that right, Azazel. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually got Dragon Albion to reconcile." The last night of the faction meeting had come. As things had been the past few nights they had met, the majority of the guards were outside of the room, with only a handful inside the room. Issei, Riaz and Sona were the guards for the devils that got to stay in the room. Vali and Tobio were there for the fallen angels. And the angels had brought Irina, Griselda and Dulio inside the room. Together the 8 of them constituted the most trusted members of the security force, though that trust was also granted to the people under their command, whether it be as their peerage or in Vali's case the group of friends that he trusted. Thanks to prolonging the peace talks to draft a treaty that would please all 3 sides, the leaders of each faction had time to talk about those that they knew would oppose the new peace. Surziches and Serafal told the others that there was a faction of devils that refused to follow them and instead followed the descendants of the 4 original devils whose names were now used as titles for the leaders of the devil faction. Continuing on to state that this group, which was called the Old Devils faction, would certainly take insult to a peace treaty. The finalized treaty that they had gathered to sign and bring into effect officially had pleased them all. On top of all the normal aspects of a peace treaty, there were a few bonuses. Ajuka would help Heaven with creating their own version of the evil pieces system. Azazel would share his research results with everyone. Michiel and Gabriel would work on diffusing the holy energy inside some of the weapons that the church had in order to be offered as gifts. Just as everything was finalized, there was a massive tremor that shook the building. Everyone rushed to the windows inside the room to peek out. There were a few columns of smoke that could be seen rising from a few craters in the ground. As they looked on, they were surprised to watch the protective barrier that had been set up. Since it was under attack, the barrier was glowing, but that glow was fading fast as the barrier lost power. Seconds after they noticed that, the barrier shattered. The moment it shattered, screams and crying could be heard. On top of the powerful people that had been brought, each of the faction leaders had to bring a small army for protective reasons in case the meeting was attacked or one of the other factions tried to use it as a trap. The screams and cries that were piercing the air came from those armies. A large amount of devils had suddenly appeared and were attacking anyone and everyone in sight. I find myself surprised. I didn't think any of the old devil faction would have the guts to attack a meeting when there was no possible chance they could do anything. Surziches spoke calmly as he turned and prepared to give out orders to the devils. Following his lead, Michiel drew himself away from the window and prepared to give his exorcists the command to fight. Azazel, however, just chuckled. No offense Urziches, but considering the ferocity they're attacking with I think you might be wrong well, if it weren't for the fact they seem to severely underestimate the power we have under our command. With an eyebrow raised Urziches turned to the fallen angel. Are you agreeing with me or disagreeing? Both Volley I bet you've been pretty bored with this meeting, why don't you go entertain yourself? With pleasure. As he spoke a feral grin came across Volley's face. Opening the window he stood next to Volley jumped out. Falling to the ground Volley quickly activated his divine dividing. Since he wanted to show off a bit he just activated the base form. Dashing into the chaos Volley became a blur. I'm going to join him. Just leave it to us, alright? Are you sure you want to do that Issei? I mean more fighters means this battle will end quicker, but just the two of you? Of course I am Sona. Besides I'm hoping we can use this to try and get Drake and Albion to reconcile at least a little bit. But still. Sonia. I'll be fine. Trust me. So let the red and white dragon emperors handle it. If you're up to it then certainly, but if it seems to be too much I'll send someone to help out. Mitchell cut in. If you think you two can handle it. But if something happens we will step in. Urziches gave his consent with a small proud smile and a wink to Sona as a way to remind her that Issei is pretty powerful. Thanks Papa. Volley and I will have this dealt with shortly then. Following Volley's lead Issei hopped out the window. Except instead of using his boosted gear he calmly snapped. His devilish magic flared out from him and coalesced into a set of stairs made from ice. Grinning as he joined the fight Issei advanced on the peons that had been brought to fight and wear down the defenders. Raising both hands in front of him, Issei held his left hand closed in a fist, while his right hand was placed on top of it flatly, with only his palm touching the other hand. Rotating his hands to the right he flared his magic just a bit. This is a new spell I've been waiting to try out. Let's see how you all like the cold. Frigid blade. As he spoke Issei pulled his left hand away from his right in a horizontal slash. A wave of icy cold energy arced out. The energy was cold enough that permafrost covered the ground underneath it as it raced outwards. Once the permafrost had covered the ground underneath an enemy it would climb up their body and slowly compress itself as layer after layer built on top of itself, encasing them in a cocoon of frost. Smirking Issei thought to himself damn that's cool. It might not be a flash freeze like my Arctic Wastellan spell, but it's still pretty fast acting. Floating a short distance away Volley whistled. You might not like fighting, but you're certainly capable. Of course my host is. Especially since he is both protecting his mate and showing off for her. You say the drag, yet he's not even using your power. That just means he doesn't have to rely on drag all the time Albion. As they bantered several of the enemy devils were confused. The red and white dragon emperors were working together instead of fighting. Even the dragons they were host to didn't seem to have much animosity for each other. Of course that was only to be expected for those that didn't know that over the past few days the factions had been meeting the two teams had become friendly rivals through games. Or that thanks to the new form of rivalry Drake and Albion were at least being civil with each other. Hey Volley. How about we make a bet? Most enemies beaten. Or who can get the last one? Both. 1 point for all of them until the last guy let's say the last one standing is worth 5 points. Deal. Hope you're ready to lose. As he spoke Volley gathered his power. With a bloodthirsty grin Volley activated his balance breaker state, a loud call of vanishing dragon balance breaker. Scale mail echoing out from the wings that were divine dividing as he did. Well partner if we want to win this bet you're going to need the boosted gear. True since he wants to put on a show let's oblige him. Following Volley's lead Issei activated his boosted gear and then collected his power to activate balance breaker. Similar to Volley's activation, a voice echoed out from the boosted gear Welsh dragon balance breaker. Scale mail. As he did this there were several gasps from the people that were watching the fight. Even his peerage and close friends had no idea that he had achieved balance breaker as well. Since when has Issei had balance breaker? You tell me. Wait, you don't know either? As the group still inside the meeting room tried to find out who knew about it, Azazel and Urziches chuckled. Both knew that despite the fact Issei claims to dislike fighting without a reason, he still liked to train and grow stronger. The two men knew it just by how he interacted with Volley while they played games, as the two would talk about their fighting abilities and share ideas with each other, not just with the fighting games they played, but their actual combat abilities as well. Urziches had also taken the time to have a few chats with Drake while Issei was asleep. From those talks he knew that Issei liked to use his dream world to train with Drake. The idea was that training with Drake would help him learn to use all the powers and abilities he gains from being Drake's host. Matching Volley's grin from before they activated their balance breakers, the two dived headlong into fighting again. With their power increased the two of them tore through the old devil faction easily. From the time they activated balance breaker to the time the fight ended, only 10 minutes had passed. Turning to each other they grinned, ready to share the total points they earned for their bet. But just before either of them could speak, let alone deactivate their sacred gears, a magic circle formed in the air just in front of them. Stepping out of the circle was a woman. One that Sirziches and Serafal knew well. Azazel, Barakiel, Michiel and Gabriel somewhat recognized her. The six of them all rushing outside to stand in front of the two teens that just trashed the old devil faction soldiers. Issei, Volley, stand down and let one of us handle her. Sirziches said as he glared at the woman. My. To think I warrant you all standing here ready to fight. Such a shame it doesn't matter. Beteria Leviathan. You are certainly stronger than last time we met. But not enough to be so boastful. With a distasteful tone to her voice, Serafal spoke to the woman. Ah, you insignificant worms can't tell just how superior I am. Lady, I can feel your power quite clearly. It's certainly a strong level, but it's not enough for any of us standing here. Azazel chimed in lazily. Issei and Volley weren't quite sure if Azazel was including them or not. Despite their strength, the two of them had used up a fair bit of energy. While they could still fight, they weren't at 100% anymore. Though they both hoped that he was including them in that comment, as it meant he trusted their power was enough. Oh. The measly little crow thinks he can hold a candle to me. Especially after I've been granted such power. It's laughable. The FFFT, lady, you're still too weak for us to take seriously. Here, let me show you. Ending his banter with Kateria, Azazel vanished from sight before suddenly appearing behind her, a spear made of light in his hand. She dodged it easily before swiping her staff towards the black-winged man. 4 magic circles appeared between the two as large serpent-like shapes raced towards him. For his part, Azazel calmly evaded the first 3 and blocked the last with just his hand. Raising his other hand, he held up a finger and shook it side to side. TSK. Using power that isn't yours and then claiming to be stronger when I can still do this. Grow up. Flapping his wings, Azazel teleported rapidly between a few locations. Those being right below Kateria, right behind, to the right and to the left. Leaving after images in each of those locations, he thrust out his hands, both holding spears of light. Not bothering to dodge attacks from the after images, Kateria thrust her staff upward to block the two coming from the real Azazel. But with her arrogant pride making her think the after images were fake, she was pierced by the spears from her left and right. That's what I mean. Though all of those were after images. I may be a little rusty when it comes to fighting, but I do know how to use my feathers to make instant clones. Cheap tricks mean nothing against me. Or so you say. Enough beating around the bush though. You've openly admitted to being given power. Who tricked you into thinking it would be enough to deal with us? Tricked me? You've got this all backwards. I tricked her. Like hell anyone would be able to match something she couldn't. With an angry growl, Kateria tried to launch even more of her serpent-like energy spells. Sighing, Azazel twirled around them, as if he was dancing. But making a sudden stop, he reached out and grabbed one, crushing it in his grasp. Let's see now, it's a she that gave you power. That helps narrow it down. All of your attacks have had a serpent-like appearance to them, so that leads me to believe it's someone connected to reptilian animals at least. Maybe a serpent dragon, but they're pretty rare. Then you mentioned that she wanted help besting someone she couldn't beat. Interesting. Ah, like you could figure it out without the answer being spoon-fed to you. Grinning at her insult, Azazel thrust a hand forward faster than she could see or react to. His hand latched onto her throat and pulled her towards him. Swiping his free hand down in a chopping motion, Azazel forcefully cut off one of her wings, causing the woman to scream in pain. You vile. No regeneration, so that rules out the goddesses connected to reptiles. Considering your base power, it would have to be someone who could give you a little bit of power, but make it feel like a ton. That narrows it down even further. I told you, you'll never figure it out. While she tried to taunt him, Azazel calmly switched hands around her throat and repeated his previous action, cutting off her other wing. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, little missy. I guess you were so weak that they couldn't give you too much power without killing you. As for the one that gave you said power, I've just been toying with you. I have both seen and recently spoken with her, so I know what her power feels like. You were given power by Office, the Ouroboros dragon, but I'm not sure why. Then you'll die without knowing why. Kateria responded hotly as she activated her magic. Her body started glowing red, as if it was slowly getting hotter and hotter. As that happened, she wrapped her arms around Azazel's body, using even more magic to make them extend even further so she could bind him with her arms. Once she had done that, Kateria began laughing maniacally before her magic caused her body to explode as she sacrificed her body to self-destruct in an attempt to defeat Azazel. Just before she exploded, however, Azazel moved his free hand to her head. He let a pulse of magic flow between his hand and her head. Azazel chuckled, but the sound came from a short distance away. I did mention that I can use my feathers to create clones, right? Never assume you're fighting the real me. Thanks for the information though. Pulling his wings back and Azazel descended to the ground to stand with his fellow leaders. Brushing the imaginary dust off his shoulders, he gave them a grin. That went well. Mind sharing what you found out? Xerxes asked, slightly irritated at the nonchalant way Azazel was handling things. Yes, dear brother, that information would be appreciated. Mitchell commented, sounding frustrated with the fallen angel. But of course. I was just thinking we'd return to the meeting room so that we could discuss it without any possible unwanted listeners. As he spoke, Azazel used his teleportation magic to return to the room. But not before telling Vali he did a good job. The other leaders followed him back, though Xerxes was the last one to move. Issei, you and Vali did a great job. I appreciate it. No problem. Yeah, Papa, Vali's right. It wasn't a problem. Still, it's good to see you two working together. But that they returned to the room as well. After making sure that everyone was ready to hear the news he had stolen from Kateria with his mental magic, Azazel explained. The Ouroboros dragon, also known as Office, had apparently gathered people that wanted power. She had promised them power to do whatever they wanted in return for their support in defeating Great Red. But Kateria, and probably the majority of the people that had been gathered, were just using Office for her power and had no intention of fighting Great Red. In Kateria's case, she wanted the power so she could storm the meeting and kill all who were involved before taking control over the devils and leading them to take over the world. While Azazel explained everything, Issei held a mental chat with Dreg. Dreg, should I know about Office and Great Red? Long story short, Office and Great Red are dragons. They are also the two strongest beings in existence. Stronger than all the gods. Hell, Office has always been strong enough that even if Albion and I worked together, we would be unable to scratch her. That's despite the two of us also being amongst the top 10 strongest beings when we had our full power. Wait. Didn't Papa say he was in the 10 strongest beings the other night? That's the current list. There are a few of us that are no longer on the list due to losing power, or in the case of Baylor and the Christian god being killed. God was part of that list. The original list goes something like this. 1. Great Red. 2. Office. 3. Shiva and God. 4. Albion and myself, though I need to mention that if we weren't exhausted from fighting each other, God would not have been able to seal us. In perfect condition, either one of us could have beaten him, but even a fly could have killed us after, and that's only because we are older and more experienced in fighting than he was. Anyway. 5. Indra, Brahma, and Vishnu. 6. Baylor. 7. La. 8. Hades. 9. Thor and 10. As a 10 Ra. But that's 14 different beings, not 10. Though I guess it's hard to assign ranks when there were so many that were equal in power. Do you have an idea of what the current list is like? Well. 1 to 4 are the same but without God, though Albion and I only stay on the list right now because we're still technically alive. 5. Would still be Brahma and Vishnu. 6. La and Indra, who has weakened for some reason. 7. Is actually your father. He's pretty powerful. 8. Hades and Ajuka. According to your father, Ajuka is also considered to be in the top 10. Anyway, Thor stays at number 9. And number 10. Fenrir. Is this based off educated guesses? Yes and no. I actually know your father is stronger than Thor and Hades at least. He tells me they are still in the top 10 and that Ajuka is also in the top 10 now. Which, based on the power I felt from him, I would be comfortable saying he's stronger than Thor at least. The 10 hasn't been active in a very long time, and supposedly Loki's kid Fenrir is stronger than him, but not as strong as Thor, so I placed him accordingly. Papa told you about this? When? Well, the other day when you were napping, he woke me up to have a chat. I asked about all this. Mainly because he and I are certain that one day you will rank in the top 10 as well. I've got a lot of work to do if I want to meet that expectation. As their conversation came to an end, there was a hand waving in front of Issei's face. Sona was trying to get his attention. Yes. Finally. You zoned out a while ago. I've been trying to get your attention for the last few minutes. The meeting is over. Everyone has returned home but us. Lord Lucifer went back to the underworld since you were preoccupied. She huffed, the tone telling him that she wasn't happy and that there was something she wanted to talk about. Sorry, I had asked Dreg for more information about Office and Great Red. Issei, I swear you better not be thinking about fighting either one of them, or so help me. No. No, of course not. I had never heard of them before, so I asked Dreg about them rather than interrupt the meeting. Good. Because I still have to yell at you for earlier. As she spoke this time, her voice rose in volume. Wincing, Issei recalled a bit of advice from his grandfather about wives wanting obedient husbands. He bowed his head. I'm sorry, dear. I know you've gotten to be pretty tough, but that doesn't mean you can take on everything. I know, Sona, I know that, but I heard the guard screaming in pain and crying for help, and I couldn't stand by. Then I took a moment to think, and I realized that Volley and the faction leaders are the only people that would have been able to shrug off the effects of my wide area attacks. Rather than risk you guys, or one of the faction leaders get hurt, I decided to limit the amount of allies on the field. Still, do you know how worried I was? Of course I do. But like I said before I started fighting. Trust me. With Drake's help I can sense a person's power and compare it to my own. I knew that Volley and I would be more than enough to deal with the situation. Just think about how I feel when you do that next time. Sona, unless I'm fighting to protect someone, you will never have to worry about me going into a fight that would actually get me hurt. Now let's go home. I'm getting sleepy and I bet you want to cuddle. Things had settled down fairly quickly once the faction meeting was over. About a week and a half after the meeting was over, Michiel had diffused the holy energy from several swords. In order to represent the balance of power and respect between the three factions, he gifted a pair of swords to the fallen angels and the devils. He had gifted the fallen angels with the sword Elondite, whereas its twin blade Ragnell was gifted to the devils. But what surprised the teenage devils the most was after he had turned Ragnell over to Surziches, Michiel had spun in place to face Issei and bowed low, while presenting him with a sword as well. His reasoning was as a wedding gift to Issei and Sona. The sword that he gave Issei was the legendary blade Ascalon, also known as the sword used by St. George to slay a dragon. Though what none of the teens knew was that Surziches, Michiel, and Azazel had all agreed to try and limit the amount of weapons with the ability to slay dragons, or at the very least make sure they couldn't be used against the two dragon emperors. Mostly because Azazel and Surziches wanted to limit the amount of things with the potential to easily destroy Issei and Volley before they could reach their prime. After all, as hosts to Drake and Albion, the two were part dragon. Other than that, things had returned to normal and carried on until it came time for summer break. Once they had been released from school, the teenage devils met up to discuss their summer plans. Issei was the one to kick the conversation off. Well, what are we doing this summer? Oh, I completely forgot you didn't know, Issei. There is a special meeting we have to attend. It's called the Youth Devils Meeting. But Surzic is allowing Azazel to sit in with him and the other Satans as they preside over the meeting. I'd say it's more than a special meeting. Plus he wants to announce the return of his son and your engagement, so it may be a pretty embarrassing meeting. Sona and Riaz replied. But because it wasn't really enough for Issei to get a full picture, he asked another question. So how's this going down? Basically all the high-class devils our age that have their own peerage will gather. We bring our peerages with us, spend a bit of time chatting with the others, sit down for a special dinner, then Lord Lucifer will give a speech. Afterwards we peerage kings are supposed to stand up and announce our dreams in turn. But Sona's itinerary-like explanation of the meeting, Issei was more than able to figure out what kind of meeting it was. Basically all of the high-class devils that were on the cusp of adulthood would be gathered and given a special feast as part of the passage into becoming an adult in devil society. That makes sense. This meeting sounds like it's the devil equivalent of a graduation ceremony. But what about announcing our dreams? What do you mean by that? We just share our dreams with them. Like Sona's dream to build a school for rating games. No, I got that. I was meaning more along the lines of what about those that don't have any grand dreams like that? I certainly don't. All I care about is getting to spend my life with Sona. As he finished speaking, Sona leaned onto his shoulder from her chair, but not before giving him a peck on the cheek. Riaz just shrugged at his question, not really sure what to tell him about not having some big and grandiose dream. Sona didn't have a suggestion either, so he resolved himself to think about it over the next few days. Okay, so I guess the next question is, where should my peerage and I go? We could stay with Sona and her peerage since we're engaged, or we could go with Riaz since I'm also part of the Gremory house. That's up to you, Ice. Sona replied with a smile before she glanced at the clock. Thanks to it being summer break, they had more time to do contracts, so the trio of peerage kings hadn't gotten a chance to get together like this until now. But it was a holiday, and Issei had asked her if she wanted to go on a date to the festival, which she needed to leave soon to get ready for. Issei for his part noticed her checking the clock and had the same idea. Wrapping their meeting up, the two returned to his home where they got ready. Though once he grabbed his clothes from his closet, Sona pushed him out of the room so she could surprise him with her outfit. As he waited for his date, Issei took the chance to check in with his slime familiar Tawny. He would have done the same with Tiamat, but Sona had asked the Chaos Karma Dragon to help her. Sorry, I haven't really had time to check in with you and Tiamat. I owe you two a lot since you manage a lot of contracts for me. Not to mention the secret training Tiamat's been helping me with. Issei spoke to his green-haired familiar, though the last bit was mumbled, so she didn't quite hear it. Think nothing of it. I mean, despite the fact I still want to make you mine, I do owe you for giving me the chance to leave the familiar forest. I don't know about Tiamat, but I think she enjoys it here too. Still. I pile a lot of work on you so my peerage and I can still be normal to the public eye. Meanwhile with Sona. Since Sona didn't trust Ani to help her without annoying her with the green slime's attempts to try and steal Issei from her, Sona had asked Tiamat to help her get ready for her date with Issei. Thank you for helping, Tiamat. It's no problem, Citri. You are my master's fiance and someone I am not nearly instantly annoyed by. The blue-haired dragon in human form responded, the last part of her statement being a jab at her fellow familiar. Please call me Sona. I'd rather not be called by Citri alone. Especially since I'm not going to be the head of family since I'm marrying Issei. But I wasn't thanking you just for helping me, I was thanking you for all the help you and Tawny are with Issei's contract work. Well, you two have been doing all that he's been able to live the way he wants to. You still don't need to thank me, watching his power grow has been enjoyable. He's also been able to help me reconnect with Drake, who is one of my oldest friends. So don't think of this as me serving him. Think of it as a give and take. Besides, you all have grown on me. Even Tawny, but don't tell her I said that. As she spoke, Tiamat finished brushing Sona's hair. Gently pulling it up, Tiamat twisted the young devil's hair into a bun. To hold the bun in the shape she wanted, the Chaos Karma Dragon used a silver hair stick. The end had an intricate red flower-shaped tip. Tiamat didn't say anything else as they continued with getting Sona ready for her date. Since it was Tiamat and she was normally very quiet, Sona let the silence sit and just enjoyed her time with the dragon. Now that her hair was out of the way, Sona slipped her arms into the sleeves and draped her specially made yukata over her shoulders. Tucking it in around herself, she waited for Tiamat to adjust the length so that it was at her ankles rather than touching the floor. As Tiamat finished that, Sona tied it in place and then turned. Taking the silver obi she had set aside to wear with her yukata and wrapping it around her waist, she held it out for Tiamat to take it. She patiently waited while Tiamat tied it for her. A moment later it was done and Tiamat motioned for Sona to do a slow spin so she could check their handiwork. Sona's yukata was a beautiful and shimmering icy blue with a nice silver trim. But the sleeves housed a pattern. That design was a long twisting and curling emerald green flower stem that connected crimson flowers together. Giving the girl a low whistle, Tiamat smirked, feeling proud of her work. Sona took that as a passing grade on her appearance and wandered over to her Jetta shoes. With Issei. After he finished thanking Tawny for her hard work, Issei beelined for the bathroom so he could get dressed in private. Since it was summer, he wanted to stick with something light and casual, but because it was a date he did want to go with a slightly more fancy look. So to combine the two, he went with a pair of blue jeans and a crimson-colored button-up shirt. Undoing the top two buttons, Issei smiled as he watched himself in the mirror while he rolled his sleeves up. He left the shirt untucked and grinned even more. It wasn't until he left the bathroom and ran into his adoptive father that he remembered he wanted to wear his silver watch. Just as he adjusted it to fit snugly around his wrist, Tiamat had opened the door so he could see Sona. Smiling softly, he held his hand out to her. As she took it, he spoke, his words causing the glasses-wearing girl to blush. No matter what you wear, you look fantastic, but this takes my breath away. Tiamat rolled her eyes at the corny line, though she did have to give him credit as her master gave an honest and sincere opinion of his fiance's appearance. Shaking her head, she told the two to leave for their date already. The two devils left, but not before thanking the blue-haired dragon in human form another time. Since Issei's home was not too far from the festival grounds, the two had a short 5-minute walk to get to the festival. So what do you want to do first? Issei asked, not really sure what to do while on a date at a festival. Sona wasn't really sure either, so she glanced around. As she did, the first thing that caught her eye was a stand for catching goldfish. Thanks to her affinity with water, she was drawn to it as an icebreaker for their date. Issei, having seen her eyes light up when she saw the stand, just chuckled. You want me to catch a few goldfish for you? Okay, let's head over there. He spoke as she returned her attention to him to point the stand out. She nodded her head somewhat eagerly, though once she caught on to the fact he said he'd catch them for her, she blushed. Shaking it off, however, she reached out and wrapped her hands around his left arm and the two made their way towards it. The stand was being run by an elderly man whose hair had faded to a light and wispy gray. He smiled as the teens approached and hit the nail on the head with his statement. Brought your girlfriend to the festival on a date, eh? I'll let you play for free this time. Issei was shocked by the fact the older man was willing to let him have a free round. Are you sure, sir? I have more than enough for tonight. It's fine, Sonny. Seeing all the young couples at this festival brings back happy memories for me. Letting them have a go for free is just my way of thanking them for reminding me of those days. The gray-haired man responded with a bright smile. Issei and Sona bowed their heads to the elderly man. After being handed the bowl and paper net, Issei crouched low and asked Sona to point out which goldfish she wanted him to catch. Since his net was made from paper, he only had a limited amount of time he could use it, and the fish were larger than normal for these games. Not only that, but to make it more interesting, it seems the old man had gathered a few different varieties of goldfish. While she looked at the fish, she saw the common goldfish that were the standard catch with these games, but there were a few lionhead, comet, fantail, and pearl scale breeds as well. There was even a black telescope variant as well. Looking over the fish, despite the different breeds, they weren't really standing out to her. Not until the young devil saw a comet variety that scales were entirely red. She pointed to it instantly after seeing it, and Issei very carefully scooped it up. Because it was a little larger than normal, he had a harder time catching it, so once he did, the paper net was nearly done for. He'd be able to catch one more if he was fast enough, but Sona didn't see another one that interested her, so he just declared that he was done. Smiling, the elderly man that was running the stand prepared a bag of water for the teens to carry their prize in. Once they left the stand, the two just wandered around the festival grounds. There were a few other games that they played, but since they were just trying to have fun, Issei and Sona didn't try hard enough to win them. At least not until they came across the stand with the shooting game. One of the prizes was a massive blue dragon stuffed animal. Said stuffed animal reminded the two teens of Tiamat's dragon form, and they knew that they had to win it. Stepping up to the stand, Issei placed his money on the counter, grabbed one of the pop-cap guns and took aim. According to the man running the stand, Issei had to hit 10 targets and not just knock them down, but to hit them dead center as well if he wanted to win the dragon stuffed animal. The reason the extra challenge was tacked on was that the dragon was the grand prize from the stand. Taking a calming breath, Issei lined up his first shot. Letting his instincts guide him, he fired and quickly adjusted his aim to the next target, fired and continued through all 10 targets. The moment he finished, the guy running the stand checked the bull's eyes on the targets, only to be shocked that Issei had pulled the challenge off on the first try. With a groan, the man handed the grand prize over to Issei, who turned to Sona with a massive grin, one that was echoed on her face. After that, the two devils had decided they'd had enough of walking around and returned to Issei's home to drop off their prizes. Adding the goldfish to the aquarium that Sona kept in their room, they searched for Tiamat. Cheekily smiling as they handed the dragon stuffed animal to Tiamat, the teens returned to the festival ground in order to find a spot to watch the fireworks that were going to be set off at the end of the night. It didn't take long, they found a nice hill with a gentle slope that they could lean back and lay down on. Which they did, though as the night started to cool down, Sona rolled over onto Issei's arm and snuggled into his chest. "Thanks for tonight, Issei. I had fun." "So did I. But I always have a good time when I'm with you." Sona blushed at his words for the umpteenth time that night. But she was still able to respond. "I feel the same way." Turning his head, Issei moved to kiss his fiance, just in time for the fireworks to start. But neither one minded missing the first moment of the show, both caught up in each other. The next day. Issei and Sona had drifted home after the fireworks were over and collapsed into bed. But rather than fall asleep right away, Issei lay in bed as he held Sona close and thought about where he and his peerage were going to be while in the underworld. The deciding factor was the fact that as he lay there, he remembered a promise to his little brother Milikas to spend more time with him. When it came time to wake up and get ready, Issei spoke with Sona about it, though he did promise her that he would spend time with her as well, especially given the fact he didn't think he'd take being separated from her for very long very well. "That's fine, I said, might even make it easier for you to figure out a dream to share with the other devils our age." Sona commented in reply to his statement about heading to the Gremory clan's territory with Riaz instead of the Citri clan's territory with her. As she spoke, the female devil moved to the bathroom to get ready for the day. Issei, having woken up first, was just getting dressed when she awoke. "What do you mean by that, Sona?" Issei quipped, raising his voice a little so he could still be heard clearly through the now closed bathroom door. "Well, my parents aren't the most reliable sort when it comes to helping decide what you want to do. But Lord Gremory and his wife, they should be able to help you figure it out." "I guess that makes sense. Anyway, my peerage is ready, so we'll head out now. I'll see you after a bit," Issei replied as he moved to the nightstand by his bed and grabbed his cell phone. Ever since it was revealed that he was a devil to his adoptive parents, he'd been given more leeway with being away from home, but he still had to keep in contact with them. Because it was still early for them to be up, he figured the better idea would be to take his phone and let them call him when they wanted updates. Sighing, Issei left his bedroom and moved to the living room with his peerage and his familiars. As they finished gathering, Issei activated his magic to teleport them to the Occult Research Club's clubroom to join Riaz and her peerage. "Good morning, Issei, Kaneko, Zophiel, Kalwerner, Bova, Garen. Oh, and you Tatani and Tiamat," Riaz greeted cheerfully. Everyone else followed suit before the red-headed devil corralled everyone's attention. She explained that rather than just teleport in like normal, it had been arranged for them to take a train to the Gremory territory. Something she and Issei both privately thought was a way to show Issei more of the territory than just the Gremory mansion. How they were sure Issei would travel with Riaz instead of Sona, neither teen was sure of. Luckily for the teens, with such a large group it was easy to stay distracted and time flew by. As the only person from Issei's peerage to have been to the Gremory territory, Kaneko was the only one that didn't gasp in awe of the mansion when they arrived. Geez, this place is even larger than Dad when he uses his full-sized form. I can't find the words. Even Master Mephisto's home pales in comparison. Bova, Zophiel, and Garen spoke after recovering. Though Bova whistled before his comment was made. Rias took pride at their reactions. Mostly because after teaming up with Issei and Sona for so many things she was not only forgiven, but outside of her joint control over Kuo being taken away all of her other punishments had been lifted and it was back to being certain that she was the next head of the Gremory clan. Ushering everyone inside, Rias, Issei, and Kaneko were all tackled by a short red-haired boy who was happy to see them. Auntie Rias. Big bro, big sis. They all chuckled at his excitement and the confusion of Zophiel, Kalwerner, and Garen about the identity of the small boy. Bova already knew about Milica since he was a devil before being part of Issei's peerage. Issei went to explain things, but before he got a word out, a figure was spotted out of corner of his eye and he raced over to the person for a hug. Mama. Shaking her head at Issei's antics, Rias took over telling his peerage the details about Milica's and Graphia. But the commotion wasn't over, as Issei's shout for Graphia drew the attention of Zeoticus and his wife Enelana, who greeted their daughter and grandson happily. It's good to see you again, Issei. Oh, but before I forget, your father is busy with work right now, so he'll be home later. He does have something to talk to you about when he gets home though. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.